Hi people, Marino Ravenberg here again. In this video, as the header suggests, I'm going to be discussing the 7 deadly sins and explain it. In essence, all of them fall across the board, but the 7 deadly sins is a perfect example to express them. What I mean when I say that all of them fall across the board, you can all count them as one. People make as follows. People make the mistake of thinking that it's all about physical action and whatnot, whereas pretty much everything you do, including bad things you do, is about the intent. It's not about the actual physical action. It's simply another reference that the immaterial has created the material. And but this, like so many other things, it just goes past people. It's just like it just flies over their heads, and they have no idea that this is actually the case. But in any case, the 7 deadly sins is a perfect example to emphasize this point. And for those of you that do not know, that I don't think anyone out there does not know what the 7 deadly sins are. Not specifically counting them, but the concept of what these sins are. But for someone that by some kind of happenstance, or let's just say metaphorical wonder, does not know what the 7 deadly sins are, is that these are simply, I want to say biblical, but as I've come to understand or have read somewhere, it is not specifically explicitly mentioned in the Bible. But bottom line is that the 7 deadly sins are more forms of wickedness. It's literally, from a Christian perspective, sinning, as in committing foul deeds or actions, which equals sin, okay, and pretty much taints one and makes one unvirtuous, or and simply bluntly put, brings you closer to hell, definitely. When it comes to judgment, as in within a Christian context. So yeah, that's simply put what the 7 deadly sins are and what they're all about. That's what the 7 deadly sins are. These are simply similar to commandments from Christianity. Okay, the same way that commandments have been issued, things that you're not allowed to do. The 7 deadly sins, sinning by nature, is also not something that you're allowed to do. It falls on equal footing with the commandment. In any case, we're just going to go over the 7 deadly sins, and I'm going to explain it to you in such a way that you can understand what I said in the beginning. That you can clearly tell that everything in the world, even, it's all about the immaterial. Because as the saying goes again, from the material sprouts forth, not the other way around. And at the same time, this also again this also again supports, this again undoes or demolishes the whole concept of those that, esoterically speaking, choose the material over the spiritual. Reminds me of the left-hand path. I'm not dissing LHPers, but I already did a video recently. If you haven't seen that video, then check out the end screen for videos that I'm referencing to, either directly or indirectly, and or videos that are just generally speaking interesting. The end screen, not the description. The end screen. In any case, the 7 deadly sins. The first one is pride. Okay, the first one is pride. The first sin. By pride, it's meant that you are not supposed to be proud, but yet you're rather supposed to be submissive. And understand that this isn't expressed in action so much, because it's not about the physical action. I mean, I can refuse help from someone, and that doesn't necessarily have to be pride. It could be a number of things based on the situation. But see, again, it's not so much about refusing the help. It's not about anything I do physically. It's not about any body movement I make. It's not about anything I do. It's solely about my intent. And the first deadly sin, simply pride, is simply a reference to the fact that you're supposed to possess a certain amount of humility. Okay, existence as a whole is geared towards is geared, from a Christian perspective, is geared towards being submissive to the Almighty God, to the one and only Almighty One. And yeah, from that vantage point, existence is all about submission, about serving. End of story. Whether you want to or not, whatever, it doesn't matter what you want or what you don't want. No. Okay, you serve, period. End of story. You submit, period. End of story. And therefore, being proud in a sense of of refusing help or refusing to submit, better said, to refusing to submit or similar to a situation that goes above you will land you in trouble. That's why, especially within an esoteric perspective. Again, I'm referring to the whole video I did on the left-hand path. That's a perfect example of pride. Pride simply stands for wanting to be your own master, which is unattainable, like I stated in that video. It's not doable because you will always be a servitor. You'll always be someone that serves under the highest God. And even within a daily context, doesn't matter how skilled you are, how good you are, there are always things that you will not have under your control and things that you can't do anything about, regardless of how skilled you are. Even me, I, for example, have no saying in the matter when it comes to death, life and death. I didn't choose life, nor will I choose death, but death will still come for me, which I don't mind. But even if I did mind, see my point? It doesn't matter. It does not matter what I want. It's something that I have to submit to, regardless of whether I want to or not. Screw have to. It's something that I submit to, period. It doesn't matter whether I'm willing or reluctant. It does not matter. The whole context of free will is taken out of the equation. But that's what's meant by pride. Moving on to the second one, greed. Greed is a pretty good one because there's a lot of greed in the world. Yeah. Greed simply stands for greed into material things, okay? Being greedy as in wanting things in excess or wanting more and not being content with what you have. And again, it's not about your action. It's not about any physical action you commit. It's about the intent behind your action, okay? It doesn't matter if you, for example, steal money from someone. It's all about your intent. The physical action, as in actually grabbing money out of a counter or from a counter and taking it, all depends on the context, okay? That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The action itself does not matter. Your intent matters. If you stole money, which is still a sin, of course, stealing is still a commandment that you're breaking, as in thou shalt not steal, but you did it because you find yourself in such bad waters that you're so broke, you're in such deep financial trouble that you literally have no other way out under the circumstances, and in one act of desperation, in a spur of the moment kind of situation, you grab that money and you hastily buy food for yourself and other things, just life necessities. You committed a sin, but the intent was not done out of greed, because that's not greed. It was done out of desperation, and desperation is not necessarily, it's not a sin. Desperation is not a sin. Desperation is a negative emotion, but it is not a sin. Desperation could be classified esoterically under agony and sorrow, but or just under pain and suffering rather than sorrow. But see, that's what I'm talking about. Greed is when you steal despite the fact that you possess the capabilities to actually make a living for yourself, to actually do things the honorable and decent and just way, and yet you simply steal, you break a commandment just because you want, in this case, money in excess. As in taking the easy road, as in, hey, listen, I can work, I can make, there are plenty of legitimate ways to come up with money, but you would rather rob a bank because you have your eyes set on $1 million. That is the definition of greed. That is sinful. That's a deadly sin, as in, hey, you're greedy. That's the definition. Greed overtook you. You simply couldn't withstand, you simply could not withstand the allure of having money in excess or having plenty, to the point where you're not satiated. It doesn't satisfy you, and you lose touch of all things of a moral nature, as in, hey, morality goes out the door if you ever had any, you name it. Even when you rob that bank, it's not about the physical action. It's not about you going into the bank and going through the motions, everybody stick your hands up, bam, 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 etc. No, it's not about that. It's about your intent. Your intent is greed itself, okay? And that's the sin explained. And see, it's not about the material, it's about the immaterial. That's the second deadly sin, greed. It's not about what you do, no, actually. It's all about the immaterial, the intent behind what you do. Or better said, the intent behind what you did. The third one is wrath. Wrath is the desire for revenge. Okay, wrath, anger in excess, better said. And as we all know, anger in excess can eat you alive. Honestly, it will break you down mentally. Constant anger, as in taking revenge on someone in a justified way, is fine. It's simply a matter of if your neighbor, if your neighbor does wrong by you, punish him, and if he has regret, then forgive him. Okay, it's simply before that was turn the other cheek. People often misunderstand that. Okay, since I'm talking about that, people confuse that stuff. Okay, people think that just because the Bible said that you're supposed to turn the other cheek, basically if someone does you wrong, if someone tries to take advantage of you or tries to commit a sin towards you in the form of abuse or something like that, if someone literally just does you wrong, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, as in instead of actually paying that person back according to Old Testament eye for an eye. It's about turning the other cheek. It's about looking the other way and taking the high road and not taking your revenge. But that's not what is meant specifically. It's meant that if someone does you wrong, you're not supposed to harbor any feelings of anger or hatred towards that person for a prolonged period of time, as in living for the rest of your life with that grudge. That grudge will only destroy you, not the person. It's like holding a hot piece of coal without ever throwing it. Your intent is to throw it to that person, but you're not throwing it, and what's going to happen? You're going to burn your hand in the process. It's simply a reference to holding on to anger, which does you damage, not the person. And yeah, that's also why it's said, like I said, if your neighbor does you wrong, punish him. If anyone does you wrong, you're well within your divine right to punish that person. And if that person has regret over what he or she did, then you're supposed to forgive that person. That is what is meant. That's just to clarify the whole, not to drift off course, but that's to clarify the whole matter of turning the other cheek, because people misunderstand that. They misunderstand a lot of stuff. Yeah, like I said, wrath is simply anger, holding on. It's not about the actual physical action. It's not about what you do, whether you punch a punching bag, whether you start breaking stuff in your house out of anger or in rage. It's not about the physical action at all. It's not about the physical action. It's about your intent. Okay, your intent, plain and simple, is anger, and actually reacting that anger off of those that wronged you. And like I explained, doing that in excess is obviously wrong. You're well within your right to take revenge on a person, but to actually hold on to anger for an excessive amount of time, okay, holding on to anger for the rest of your life because someone messed with you, someone took advantage of you. For example, you were married and your husband or wife cheats on you, and you hate them for the rest of their lives. That is wrong. It's in reference to what I explained about turning the other cheek and punishing those that do wrong against you. Your husband or wife deserves to be put in his or her place, but you're not supposed to hold on to that anger, because that anger will only destroy you immaterially, or it will damage you severely immaterially. That is what is meant by wrath. Envy is the fourth one. Envy simply stands for, again, not the material action. It's not about envy is pretty much a cut and dry example. It's very black and white, as far as I can see or tell. In terms of that, it leaves little to the material. It leaves little to the imagination from a material point of view. Envy is the clearest example, because usually when people are envious, there is little to no physical action. If there is any physical action at all, something that they do because they're envious of someone, then the action is not harming or damaging. But like I said, it does not matter, because that's not important. That doesn't matter. If any physical action you do, when you envy someone, you tend to pull your hair out, or you tend to play with your ears, or whatever the hell you do. No, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you do. It's about your intent, okay? And you're envious of your neighbor, for example, as in you want what he has. Envy and greed are very similar in that regard. You're simply envious of something that someone possesses, either a quality, or whether it's a quality, or whether it's an actual tangible good. You name it. You saw your neighbor buy a flashy new car and you're envious of him. You name it. That's obviously also a sin, because it doesn't matter what your neighbor does. You need to mind your own business, and your neighbor, you need to mind your own business, and your neighbor, you have no idea how hard he worked for that car, whether he deserves it or not, regardless of whether he got what he acquired, regardless of whether his acquisition is justified or is deserved morally or not. Doesn't matter whether he dealt drugs, that's his problem. Bottom line is, you're not supposed to envy people. You're not supposed to envy others for what they have. If you're ugly, for example, and your neighbor is good looking, then yeah, you're also not supposed to envy your neighbor. Okay, that's why everyone is created differently. So yeah, you're not supposed to lust after the things of others. You're not supposed to lust after the qualities, or whether they be tangible or intangible, that others possess. You're supposed to make do and or focus on improving yourself, so on self-improvement. That's it. And speaking of lust is the fifth one. Yeah, lust is also pretty much self-explanatory. Yeah, lust. Also, a good deal of people don't realize this, but there's a difference, okay? Lust is specifically a reference to sexual actions. But again, it's not about the physical action, it's not about the having sex. It's about the immaterial, the intent behind it. Yeah, and like I said, a lot of people don't know this. There's a difference between lust and love from a sexual standpoint. That's why there is making love, and then there's having sex. Having sex is strictly a reference to it's a reference to the material. It's a reference to just wanting someone sexually, as in someone appeals to you physically and you want to have sex with that person. It's all about the carnal aspect, as in, hey, bluntly put, I'm seeing a hot piece of ass, really beautiful woman. For example, me as a heterosexual male, I see a really beautiful woman. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind in general is sex, because it's lust. See, it's the same lust. It's not about the physical action itself. It's about the fact that I'm lusting after her, literally. It's about the intent. The intent in itself is a sin. That's the sin embodied, not the physical action. It doesn't matter whether whether I have sex with her fully or income. It doesn't matter what you do. The physical action is important. It doesn't matter whether we do anal, what sexual position I screw her in. Doesn't matter whether I do a doggy style. It does not matter. No. Even if it's just foreplay, or even if she just performs oral sex on me. No. None of those things matter. That's my point. The physical action does not matter. It's the intent. Your intent is lust. You're lusting after that person. Whereas with making love, it's different. Making love is simply a physical. I'm already done with lust. I'm just saying. I'm explaining briefly what making love is. Making love is literally just showing that you care about someone in a sexual way. Having sex with a person, but it's not about the carnal aspect. You're not focused on that person's physical attributes. You care for that person, and you simply want to show that you care about that person. You want to show that you actually love that person, and you want to express that in a physical way. And as a result, you have sex. But that's the difference. It's a clear-cut difference. Okay? Whereas lust is all about the carnal aspect. There are specific physical features that attract you to a person, as in, for example, that woman has beautifully broad hips, she has big breasts, she has a nice ass. There are specific physical traits that trigger lust within you. That's what I'm talking about. That leads to the desired action. But the action doesn't matter or anything like that. It's purely about the intent. That's why there is no, as far as I know, there's no synonym or anything else for this. It's literally just lust, as in I'm lusting after a person. The lust is sin embodied, pretty much. Or the phrase itself is lust embodied. The phrase lust itself is self-explanatory. Okay, lust is lust, as in the sin itself. I'm lusting after someone. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, up is number 6. So far we've had pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust. Gluttony is another one. Gluttony is also one of my favorite ones, so to speak. Not that I'm gluttonous as a human being, no. Gluttony, again, it's not about the action. Similar to lust, gluttony is not about, similar to all the others, for none of them it's about the action, but it's expressed firmly in lust as well as in gluttony. Gluttony is simply the desire to eat as much as possible, in excess even. Yeah, it's pretty much self-explanatory, honestly. Okay, when someone is gluttonous, that means that person enjoys eating. That person is greedy. That person wants food, or to consume in excess. Whereas it's not about the physical action. It doesn't matter what kind of food the person eats. It doesn't matter how much food they put in their mouth. It doesn't matter how they eat even. It's purely about the intent. The intent to consume in excess. As in, you want to go to every available restaurant. You ate at Burger King today. You're going to go to McDonald's tomorrow, and the day after that you're going to go to Pizza Hut, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. It's not about the physical action. It's about the intent. Your intent to consume as much as possible to the point where you're completely full, to the point where your physical body can't handle anymore. That is a sin in itself. And it has nothing to do with the physical, obviously. It's purely about the intent. The intent to do so is a sin. That is gluttony in itself. Similar to lust and gluttony both have that in common. The action itself, physical action, is nothing but biology. The same way that having sex is nothing but a whole biological process, which you're pretty much programmed to do from a neutral perspective. And the same goes for gluttony. Okay, in theory, it's nothing but consumption. You need to eat, otherwise your body is going to break down and starve, and you're going to die as a result. But like I said, that's strictly in theory. It has nothing to do with the material. From a biological perspective, it's nothing but basic biology. Okay, eating, normal, having sex for procreative purposes in general, fine. But it has nothing to do with the physical action, the sin specifically. It's all about the intent behind what you intend on doing. Okay, that's why it's called what you intend on doing. Your intent behind your intent that triggers the physical action or desired physical action. Oh, last one, sloth. Yeah, sloth is pretty much also self-explanatory. Sloth simply stands for and this is also a good, nice, vivid example. It stands for not wanting to commit to any labor and remaining in a physical dormant-like state as much as possible. For example, sleeping or doing as little as possible. It pretty much opposes work, as in being productive. You could say sloth has as an opposite productivity. Okay, the opposite of sloth would be productivity in a practical context. And again, with both of them, it's not about the physical action. It's about your intent. Your intent to want to produce. And with sloth, it's your intent to literally not want to do anything or want to do as little as possible in the way of productivity. You don't want to commit any labor, even if that labor does not require physical action. The concept of not wanting to do anything and just, so to speak, sitting on your rear end, sitting on your ass, is a sin. That is sloth. That's why the animal sloth is also named there, because the animal moves so slow. That's why it's called a sloth, S-L-O-T-H. That's the definition of sloth as a sin specifically. the absence of the desire to be productive, pretty much, or counteracting productivity by being as little productive as possible or not being productive at all, and just remaining in that state of non-productivity. Regardless of what you do physically, that doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter whether you're standing or whether you're sitting or whether you're lying down. Nothing that you do to express the fact that you're slothful, okay, actually has anything to do with the sin, because it doesn't matter what you do. You can stand upright with your eyes open and you can still be slothful without having to close your eyes, because usually people think when you're lazy, lazy is a synonym for sloth, and the down to earth obvious synonym for sloth. When you're lazy, you're slothful. You usually either lie down or you sit in a lazy chair, you name it. These are defining characteristics, okay, common characteristics of being slothful, being lazy. But again, the physical action does not matter. It's about the intent. The intent to not want to do anything, to not want to work at all, that's sloth. Theoretically speaking, although it's something that rarely happens, theoretically speaking, you could be slothful, like I said, by simply standing up and having your eyes open. But the very fact that you could be working, for example, or doing something, productivity, you could be doing something productively, you could be doing something productively, that alone is sloth in itself. Just standing there and not doing anything, and your eyes are wide open, everything, you're completely awake and everything, but you simply do not want to do anything. You deliberately do not want to be productive, and you want to stay like that state as long as possible, or for whatever reason. That is sloth. The intent itself is sloth, defines sloth. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay. And they oppose the 7 heavenly virtues, of course. And yeah, the virtues are prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, and chastity. And chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, and humility. I wasn't planning on treating this, but upon further inspection, yeah, lust is opposed by chastity, gluttony is opposed by temperance, charity is opposed by greed, sloth is opposed by diligence, wrath is opposed by patience, envy is opposed by kindness, and pride is opposed by humility. See, it's the exact same thing I already explained, so I don't need to discuss this any further. The 7 heavenly virtues do not need to be treated, because I already stated everything. I already expressed that in my explanation. So yeah, again, I recite: pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Those are the 7 deadly sins. It's obvious. The opposite of pride is humility, like I said. This is just a recap. The opposite of greed is being charitable. Yeah. The opposite of wrath is patience, as in calming yourself. In a modern day context, just being cool, keep it cool. The opposite of envy is kindness, as in actually being happy and for someone rather than envying them. The opposite of lust obviously is chastity, as in to not lust after every hot piece of ass that comes along, to actually, keep your thing in your pants. Gluttony, the opposite of gluttony, simply stands for temperance, as in, you could also say fasting could be the opposite of gluttony. Fasting, the exact opposite of consuming in excess, consuming either in moderation, so only when necessary, or abstaining. But fasting wouldn't be a literal opposite. You'd think so, but fasting isn't a literal opposite. Fasting is how should I put it? Fasting is an entirely different thing. Fasting, which is the extremist ends of an opposite compared to gluttony, but not practically in this context. The opposite of gluttony would be temperaments, as in being temperamental and consuming in moderation rather than in excess or out of greed, consumptive greed. And sloth, again, Sloth has the opposite. Like I said, it's productivity. Okay, being productive and just being a hard worker. Of course, working smart and working hard, but not just sitting on your ass. The opposites are pretty much spot on and self-explanatory. In any case, that is it. I'll hear from you guys if you have any other questions, and see you guys later. Ciao.